Liberty Township, New Jersey, 2003. Honors classes. Straight A's. Acceptance letters flood Alyssa's mailbox, each one offering a full scholarship. College has always been her dream, but as each offer comes in, she can't help but ask herself, do they want me for my talent or for my nationality? What happens when diversity has a price? Find out. Read How Much Indian Was I? My Fellow Students Asked by Alyssa Washuda.
I came into my own as a Native American woman in high school. My skin being on the fair side of plain yo play, I designated my dark brown hair as the body part that would legitimize me, letting its split ends shoot for my waist. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that in 2000, 3 Native Americans lived in Liberty Township, New Jersey. My mom, my brother, and me, all enrolled members of the Cowlitz tribe. In early 2003, I was a high school senior. My only grade below an A was in gym class. On my report card, next to the B, the gym teacher wrote, "Works to ability." After nearly 13 years of academic perfectionism, I finally got a glimpse of the payoff when the University of Maryland at College Park sent me a letter inviting me to interview for a scholarship. Inside the honors building, I immediately noticed all the dark skin in the waiting room. I sat on the couch between my parents, wondering whether I should have worn some dream catcher earrings. My letter had said that this was an interview for a merit scholarship with no mention of diversity. I worried that the interviewers were going to quiz me about my favorite Indian ceremonies. If they wanted me to speak in my native tongue, I would have to make something up on the spot. There was a lot of money on the line. That day I wondered what was so special about me that the adults would want to hand me what amounted to a sack filled with money. Not my poems or my miniature clay sculptures of the members of Nirvana or my gleaming transcripts. There were probably plenty of kids in the room who knew how to use their graphing calculators for purposes other than playing Tetris. The interviewers greeted me with smiles. They asked about our drive from New Jersey and what I'd been reading. I talked about a book about Pine Ridge Reservation and my desire to work in Indian country. I told the nodding adults all about poverty, tradition, alcohol, and loss. An ancient people in Southwest Washington, the Cowlitz tribe maintains vibrant cultural practices and social and conservation programs despite its lack of a reservation land base. My Cowlitz mom, who had lived in the Columbia River Gorge her whole life, met my East Coast dad in college in Seattle, and afterward they moved to New Jersey. I didn't know how to talk about the histories embedded in my bones, the damming of our language that coincided with the damming of the Columbia River, my wordless conversations with the towering petroglyph woman by the water. My belly swell that my mother told me was an Indian thing while I battled it with Weight Watchers point counts. I thought that if I spoke the truth, they would think all the Indianness had evaporated from my family line, leaving me pale and dry. So I said, I want to do something for my people. And 2 weeks later, I received a thin letter, thick with the promise of more money than I could imagine. "4 years of tuition, room, board, and books. Not long after I hung my bell-bottom jeans and shower tote in my cinder block closet, I told the kids on my floor of the honors dorm that in order to keep my scholarship, I'd have to obsess over every grade point. That money never went to white kids, they said. So I must be an undercover genius. I'm not all white, I said. What was my SAT score, they wanted to know. My GPA, extracurriculars, how much Indian was I? The first thing I learned in college was that white boys don't care if you're legitimately Indian. If they think you robbed them, if they think you robbed them $100,000 in scholarship money that they'd earned holding a tube of countless hours on a high school football field. I threw myself into super Indianness, taking both of the Native Studies courses offered by the university's anthropology department. I participated in a summer internship program for Native students and scored a part-time job in tribal relations with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I graduated with a 4.0 GPA. 4.0 GPA. If the university had wanted to reel in an Indian who could bring the numbers, I figured they had gotten what they paid for, as long as I became the Indian I had promised they were getting. I didn't take any time off before shipping myself to Seattle for graduate school in creative writing at the University of Washington. The master's program offered me no teaching assistantship, and I told the program director I couldn't sign on unless the price tag was slashed. She came through with the university program, committed to serving underrepresented graduate students. After I sent over a photocopy of my tribal card to add to the application, the grant program awarded me a generous partial scholarship. Creative writing programs are notorious for the feelings of resentment that brew when students feel like a bunch of blood-hungry dogs made to scrap over funds granted on the basis of artistic prowess. But my colleagues were supportive of my scholarship. In my application essay, I said that part of Washington's allure was its proximity to my tribe. I meant it. In the 5 years I have been at Washington, I have been attending Cowlicks General Council meetings and learning to participate. During my second year, I was a graduate assistant for Department of American Indian Studies, and I now serve as the undergraduate advisor. I also teach classes that focus on Native literature and film representations of Natives. I'd love to see more Native students at Washington and elsewhere. Native people deserve to be educated in spite of the extraordinary challenges many face because of uniquely broken educational systems wrapped up in the mangled trust relationships that sets Indian identity apart from other racial or ethnic distinctions. Native people hold an elemental piece of this nation's life story, and universities will suffer without an Indigenous presence. Those interviewers back at Maryland would be happy with my academic career, I think. My work these days comes with a clear mission: to help the students I teach learn who we are and who we are not, and to help them, especially those who were least prepared because of their backgrounds, navigate the academic maze. I wish my students could stop worrying about money, who's getting it, why, and how they're going to get some of their own, so they can focus on learning to write killer essays and getting smarter than they ever thought possible. I'll never know why Maryland gave me a full scholarship, but is it so bad to think they wanted me? As my gym teacher noticed, I work to ability. I pull out all the stops in every class. Perhaps the interviewers sense my yearning to go for broke and to stuff every synapse with academic pleasures. From my family and Native communities, I have learned about the gifting tradition in our culture. Accepting a gift with grace and giving meaningful gifts are skills more important and more difficult to cultivate than learning to graph calculus problems. So I have stopped apologizing for the gifts I receive. I accept them. And now I have my own gifting to do. I am not Pocahontas. As a Cowlitz Indian child, white-skinned and New Jersey born, I grew up fielding the question, how much Indian are you? Without any sense of its meaning, once I was old enough to know that my mother was Indian and my father wasn't, I began responding half. It wasn't until my teenage years that I would ask my mother for the details of my ethnic breakdown. She pulled an index card out of her desk drawer. I knew that I was Cowlitz, Polish, Irish, and Ukrainian, but the card was full of surprising facts as well. What did it mean to be Welsh, French? The truly shocking information the card carried was my Indian blood quantum. I didn't know that was a term for the sum of the fractions next to Cowlitz and Cascade. This was how much. People had prodded me about, and it wasn't the half I'd assume. It's, what are you, a quarter? People would toss out at times, like it wasn't that. The sum of the Cascade and Cowlitz fractions made an awkward hybrid. I decided it would be nobody's business. So I grew up in the time of Native American proverb posters and mass-produced dream catchers. Disney's Pocahontas was released in 1995 when I was 10. I had outgrown my Barbies then, but I still added a Pocahontas doll to my retired collection. I knew that she was full-blooded. She communicated with animals. She never wore a jacket. She painted with all the colors of the wind. If someone had asked me to explain the difference between my plastic doll and me, I might have said that she was the real Indian and I was the fake one. In the 90s, Americans loved a certain kind of Indian. Dances with Wolves, a box office triumph after a flood-filled filming process, is a fictional account of Lieutenant John Dunbar, Kevin Costner, and his process of going Indian after befriending a band of Lakota neighbors. While the film succeeds in rendering the Lakota characters a fully developed people with motivations, concerns, humor, and the individual personality variations often afforded only non-Indian characters, at the end of the filmmakers made their fictionalized native band vanish. Viewers are informed via epilogue. 13 years later, their homes destroyed, their buffalo gone, the last band of free Sioux submitted to white authority at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. The great horse culture of the plains was gone, and the American frontier was soon to pass into history. The Hollywood Indians certainly hadn't disappeared. Following the success of Dances with Wolves, the Western came back into style with depictions of Indians from earlier eras projected onto screens worldwide. Black Robe, 1992. The Last of the Mohicans, 1992. Geronimo, An American Legend, 1994. Squanto, A Warrior's Tale, 1994. And other films depicted confrontations between indigenous communities and colonizers. Although progress had been made since the time of John Ford Westerners with Native characters played by Native actors and increased attention paid to character development rather than poorly sketched savages, still, these films relegated Native peoples to the past. Thunderheart, 1992, glances back only 2 decades into American Indian history. Its fictionalization of the 1973 Wounded Knee occupation on Pine Ridge Reservation. Questions of blood quantum and Lakota identity arise for Ray Lavoie, Val Kimmer, a white identifying FBI agent who is assigned to the reservation because of his Lakota ancestry. Lavoie's blood quantum is of great concern to him and to those around him. We learned immediately that Lavoie's Lakota blood quantum is 1/8, and a blood chasm forms between him and tribal cop Walter Crow Horse, Graham Greene, who is full-blooded Lakota and was born and raised on the reservation. Blood quantum functions as shorthand for potency of identity. By the end, Lavoie is seeing visions, some ancestral memory having been shaken from his bones. In Hollywood, 119 minutes is ample time to turn a character from community outsider to medicine man, because realness is nothing more than imagery and romance. No film of the 90s does this more explicitly than The Last of the Mohicans, 1992, the most recent of a series of adaptations of James Fenimore Cooper's 1826 novel and a Roe Best Performer at the box office. At the end of the director's cut of the film, Chingachgook Chingachgook, Russell Means, his adopted son Hawkeye, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Hawkeye's romantic partner, Cora, look out over a great expanse of virgin land. Chingachgook, the frontier, moves with the sun and pushes the red man of these wilderness forests in front of it until one day there will be nowhere left. Then our race will be no more, or be not of us. Hawkeye, that is my father's sadness talking. Chingachgook, no, it is true. The frontier place is for people like my white son and his woman and their children. And one day there will be no more frontier. Then, like men, you will go too. Like the Mohicans, a new people will come, work, struggle. Some will make their life, but once we were here. Although the dying out of native populations might make for the tidy completion of narratives, and the idea of vanishing race has developed an unsavory romantic appeal, the truth is that colonization didn't wipe out North America's indigenous peoples. The 2010 census reported that 5.2 million people identified as American Indian. Currently, there are 566 federally recognized tribes. Images have emerged from Hollywood that reinforce stereotypes of Native peoples as suspended in time, but tribal cultural practices continue to develop in a natural correspondence with the passage of time. Many of these tribes have come to use blood quantum, the degree of Indian ancestry, expressed fractionally, as a consideration when defining their membership. Contemporary determinations of blood quantum often look back to base roles, records of tribal membership often created by non-Indians. Determinations of blood quantum are made by establishing proximity to the ancestors listed on these rolls. The Dawes rolls are the best known base rolls, listing people accepted by the Dawes Commission between 1898 and 1914 as members of the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole tribes. For my tribe and others in the region, the Roblin rolls form a base roll. Similar to the Dawes rolls, these listings of families were created in 1919 by Indian agent Charles Roblin to record names of Indians in Western Washington. So base rolls can be wrought with problems. Commissioners denied some families enrollment, while other families resisted giving their names to the government. Some registrants died before their names could appear. The records are handwritten, aged, and littered with inaccuracies. Blood quantum is not a traditional indigenous value of North America. Ancestral fractionation was introduced by the British settlers. First appearing in colonial policy in 1705 Virginia statute barring a mulatto or the child of an Indian and a grandchild, or great-grandchild of a Negro from holding public office. In 1866, Virginia law defined Indian as every person, not a colored person, having 1/4 or more of Indian blood. This mathematical determination undermined ancient systems that determined kinship without measuring a family's metamorphical blood volume. The Cowlitz tribe no longer uses blood quantum as a criterion of membership, and I am proud of my tribe for this. Currently, the tribe's enrollment requirements require that only newborns under age 1 who are shown to be lineal descendants of Cowlitz members can be enrolled in the tribe. Those tribes that do use blood quantum as a requirement of enrollment are doing the challenging work of determining their membership, and I lack both the great wisdom and immense foolishness to suggest policy changes for other tribes. Although my tribe doesn't require me to demonstrate a minimum degree of ancestry, acquaintances, innocence, questions of how much seem to gesture towards a desire to get a truth about how far I am from ancestor plucked from Kevin Costner's Friendly and Doomed band, A Real Indian. How much Indian are you? However, well-intentioned implies that alive within me is only a tiny piece of the free, noble Indian that passed on long ago, a remnant from which I am far removed. The questions, individually, are born from a place of curiosity, but the questions have embedded in a time when blood quantum was used to rob indigenous peoples of rights and ultimately lead to our being defined out of existence. Pocahontas, in the final scene of the Disney recreation, sends John Smith back to England and tells him, "No matter what happens, I'll always be with you forever. What happens? The viewer is spared the discomfort of a mixed-race happy ending. What happens historically? Pocahontas is captured by the English, marries John Rolfe, has a son, travels to England to serve as the crown symbol of the civilization and Christianization of the heathens, and dies there from tuberculosis at the age of 22. The Disney version, in which Pocahontas never fit her feet into heeled shoes and refused to leave the woods, persists.